The way you think is the lens through which you observe every situation in life. The way you observe influences how you respond. And the way you respond has an enormous impact in your life, for better or for worse.
You used the word respond. That's an important word because many people, they just go through life reacting to whatever happens to them. And that's not an ideal situation to be in.
The difference between responding and reacting can be as significant as the difference between life and death. You touch a hot stove, you react. And that reaction could save you from getting a severe burn. Reactions are reflexive. Responses are actions taken after thoughtful consideration to certain circumstances or stimuli. The good news is that you can train your reactions to be more controlled and specific by the way you think.
We've identified 6 ways that people react financially. And these aren't in any specific order, but these are ways that we observe.
Some people might feel discouraged or defeat, or just have an attitude of defeatism all the time. These can be loyal people. They could be fearful people, people that don't really like change, but they might pull out the credit card and put money on it just because that's what they've always done. Or they might think that they might diligently contribute to their 401k every dollar that they can scrimp and save because they think that's what you got to do.
In fact, as retail therapy has become a koan word in our society for people that are discouraged or depressed about their finances.
And they just do what they have always done.
Another way that people can respond is they can kind of panic and take drastic actions when they realize that something is wrong. And these people might see that their finances aren't looking as good as they want, and so they're going to try to go out and find some too good to be true investment to make it all back again.
Or maybe they're concerned about what the government is doing or what the World Economic Forum is doing to their finances and what's going to happen to all of us in the future. And they forget to realize that King Solomon wrote a long time ago, what has happened is going to happen again. Nothing's new under the sun. Someone says, oh, look at this. This is new. No, it's been around forever. So the concepts that are behind new conspiracy theories, as people might call them, those have been common for mankind forever. We don't need to panic about this. We need to put our trust and faith in the one that controls all that.
Then there's the people who make excuses. And it's kind of the blame game. Well, I never had the opportunity to learn this, or I didn't grow up in a family who talked about money.
I didn't have the education that other people did.
It makes me think of a song I heard when I was a kid. Excuses, excuses. You hear them every day. It keeps you from doing what you know you should do.
And then sometimes they complain, well, I don't have an office to do my finances in.
I don't have a computer or a desk. And it just goes on and on.
I remember hearing you tell a story one time about somebody who couldn't start painting because they didn't have a studio.
That's right. They were questioning me because I was doing some painting. I didn't have a studio either, but I had a kitchen table that I would get out my paints and I would paint, and then I would pick everything up, put it away so that we could have dinner on the table. But their idea was, if I'm going to paint, I need a studio. And a lot of people are waiting for their studio, and they think because they don't have the right desk or they don't have the filing system that they want, well, they just can't take action. They're going to blame and make excuses. Sometimes they even say, well, I have ADHD, or I have too many children, or I have this problem or that debt. You know, it's just ad infinitum.
How many times have we heard the word, it must be nice? Because
Yes.
people are making an excuse for what they see in others that they would like themselves, but they don't want to put the effort or energy or thought process in to get there.
And then we have the people who have their head in the sand.
This reminds me of something I heard years ago called denial. It's not a river in Egypt. It's something that people do frequently to just ignore what's happening and don't do anything about it. It's very easy just to ignore the problem that not enough money is coming in to meet your needs, or it's real easy to ignore the fact that you're spending more than you're making. Those are the easy way outs.
It's really easy until it's not.
It's a lack of responsibility.
And this brings to mind a picture of a woman whose children were misbehaving. Obviously, there was problems. Everybody around was noticing this. And she saw it and she turned her head away. And by turning her head away, she wasn't looking at the problem and didn't feel that she needed to address it. And that's what's happening with people who have their head in the sand. The problem doesn't go away. It's still there. It's just that they're not looking at it.
Mm-hmm. We talked to a guy in the last couple of years who had a lot of credit card debt. And he had so much credit card debt, he didn't even want to think about it. So he hired an assistant to make the credit card payments so he didn't have to see the balances.
Yeah,
That's a classic way of putting your head in the sand.
And he created a larger financial expense for himself because he just didn't want to deal with it.
I remember when we were first married, Michelle, we would sit down every Sunday afternoon and we would go through everything that we spent money on. What you wrote checks for, what I wrote checks for, what I'd spent cash for, what you'd spent cash for, what we'd put on a credit card, which we didn't use at all back then. And we weren't doing that to critique each other's spending. We were doing that to form an awareness of what we were spending, so we weren't burying our head in the sand. We were trying to decide what is it that we're spending together so that we can make sure that we're on track to get to where we want to go in life.
And then we have the procrastinator.
This is closely related to the people that put their head in the sand, but the procrastinator actually recognizes that there's a problem. They know there's a problem. They're just going to fix it later.
The procrastinator can be said, well, I'm making my office plans, and then I'm going to design the interior, and then I'm going to design my desk, and I'm going to set up my business plans, and I'm going to set my goals.
So they can get stuck in preparing.
And pretty soon, they're procrastinating by preparing.
They're doing all these peripheral things that really don't contribute to the solution to their problems. They're busy doing all these other things, but not really addressing the problem.
And then procrastinators can end up feeling guilty about what they haven't done because everybody else is getting results and they're still preparing.
I think of when we started our third business, Michelle, and I had, I think, the first Apple desk because we didn't have time to make a lot of preparations. We knew where we wanted to go, but that Apple desk was really cool. It was Apple boxes stocked up on each side, about 3 deep, and a cut-off door that had been left in the house that we'd just moved in for the desktop.
Yes.
And that worked just as good as a cherry wood desk.
Then there are those that overcommit. They're all in. They're going to work harder.
Regardless of the problems that they're facing, it's just the answer is always to work harder.
Work harder, make more money.
That reminds me of the book Animal Farm, where the animals take over from the farmer and they're working, and then the pigs come in and they take over and they take the place of the farmer and are even more cruel than the farmer was. And nothing was turning out, and the horse, dedicated, loyal, faithful, said, I will just work harder when things didn't turn out. Well, sometimes you have to stop and say, harder work isn't what's necessary, it's smarter work. What am I thinking about? Does this say I'm going to work harder? It doesn't imply any thought process in it.
Hard work is certainly important, but when you find somebody that's habitually overcommitting on things that they shouldn't be, those people tend to burn out. There is going to come a point in time in crisis. They're just delaying addressing the problem by trying to work harder through it.
Just because someone's working harder doesn't mean they're progressing down the road that they want to get to. We have to be very careful that we don't fall into these traps that we've identified here, because all of these are a different way of thinking about it. There's a way to think that's going to change these habitual actions of people.
Most of the time when we're looking at people's financial results or even other areas of life, we see some of the actions that they take and some of the results that they're getting. We either like those results or we don't like the results. What we don't see underlying those actions and those results are the thoughts and the choices that led to those actions, that led to those results. And that's enormously important. And this works both on the positive and on the negative side. You think about a politician that is caught in a lie, or you think about a celebrity that's caught in a scandal. It's all in the paper. And they say, whoa, I made some bad choices, and that led to these bad results. I'm going to change my ways. But then they might be back in the paper in just a few months or a few years for another scandal or another lie, because what's happened is they really haven't changed the underlying foundation. If they haven't changed the way that they're thinking, their thoughts, then that doesn't change the choices that they make, and it doesn't change enough of the actions that they take, and so their results are going to end up going back to where they always have.
You know, I like the quote that says, "You aren't what you think you are, but what you think you are."
Proverbs 23:7 says, "As a man thinks in his heart, so is he."
If you have a bad mindset, how do you change it? If you have a habitual habit of reacting instead of responding, how do you change that? If you don't like the results you're getting today, how do you start getting the results that you do want? We're going to talk about all of this when we come back after the break.
While we're on break here, we're reading through the recent reviews y'all have been leaving for the Wealth Talks podcast. These reviews really help the show to reach more people. I was recently telling you about the negative reviews Apple was choosing to feature instead of all the positive reviews our show has. But you all leaving these recent positive reviews, now Apple's featuring those. It really helps the show to reach more people. Paul's review really stood out. You've been listening to the show since 2016, Paul, and never missed an episode. Wow, that's quite something.
Dr. Jeff B. here. I don't know if that's Dr. Jeff B., the father or the son, but he says the information is on point and practical. And they've been with McPhee Insurance for about 15 years.
Jacob here says, "I wish I'd found this podcast earlier in life. This advice exposes many financial scams and is excellent at teaching basic financial principles that are applicable immediately."
We appreciate you leaving these reviews for the Wealth Talk show. If you haven't reviewed the podcast yet, you can do that on Apple Podcasts. Thank you.
As a chiropractor, I used to adjust subluxations in people to restore proper function to their bodies. But as a joke, I had on the wall a redwood paddle that had written on it, "Attitude Adjuster." How you think is so important, and adjusting our attitude can change and give us the results that we're looking for in life.
Picture yourself, you're tired, you've maybe got a headache, and you just decide you've got to lay down. Well, the kids are playing in the other room, so you lay down on the couch, you're trying to rest, but they get noisier. So you call out, "Hey kids, I'm laying down, I'm trying to take a nap, please quiet down." Quiets down a little bit, and you're laying there, and you start to feel like you might drift off, and the volume in the other room raises. And this time they're also having squabbles. So you call out again, "Hey kids, I said to be quiet. I'm laying down. You need to quiet down yourselves." It gets quieter, and you're almost going to sleep when you hear a scream. That did it. You are going to take care of this problem. You fly off the couch, you march down the hall, and you are met by the two children. The older one has their arm around the younger one. The younger one is the one screaming, but you notice their hand has blood dripping down. Immediately, your reaction changes. You're no longer acting out of anger, but you're responding with compassion and concern. What is happening? There's blood dripping. In a heartbeat, your reaction changes to a response immediately.
And that's how you want to make changes quickly. You don't want to wait around and try to do it through a process. Process is important to make a result successful, but you change very quickly.
And if we're not careful, if we change quickly, that can just become another reaction too. And we can react out of anger. Maybe it was the older kid that got this little one bleeding, and we can take our anger out on them. But to make our reactions become responses, we need to get educated. We need to find out what's going on, what happened. And we can do that prior to when a reaction is necessary in life by training our minds and thinking different about things all through life, because the way we think is the way we become. If we're thinking ahead of time and training our minds to respond when we normally would react, we're going to be prepared for that time.
What's the solution if someone doesn't know what to change? So they feel like it would be a reaction if they acted quickly and flamboyantly. What's the answer?
The answer is to get educated, listen to podcasts, read, study, look at other people's lives and how they respond to the same situations in their life. Those are the things that help us become better and better at becoming responsive rather than reactive.
I'm thinking about too how Nelson Nash used to talk to us. And, once you identify, like maybe you identified those 6 reactions that people make financially in the first half of this show. Once you identify yourselves, you need to take a piece of paper, draw a line on it, and then get over it. You have to decide, oh, that's me right there. I need to make a change. And then you go about finding out what you need to do to make that change. It's a decision made right now in a heartbeat.
The word educate comes from the same word that we get elucidate from, and that means shining light on something. And when we shine the light on this example of the 2 kids, one bleeding and the other one's arm around it, you put a little light on that and you find out what's going on. And now you can have the compassion and have the response that you need. It's the same thing with people's finances. If we find out that I always respond or reflexively react to bad financial news by becoming discouraged, well, then what do I need to do to change that? Where do I need to shine the light on that to make that difference? If I always put my head in the sand reflexively instead of responding like I should, what kind of light needs to be shed on that? Where do I find that source of light?
I have a great example around this. People that budget. If they overspend their budget or something, they might get all discouraged and down and pinch pennies even tighter. But that's not really a wealthy mindset.
There's other ways that you can think than just by a budget.
You do want to run your finances in a balanced way.
Absolutely.
But that doesn't mean that you have to count every dollar. And counting every dollar, sometimes you might need to do that. Like when you sat down when you were first married and looked at everything that was going out so you could get a feel. But once you had that feel, you didn't have to sit down and count every dollar every week because you had that sense of balance.
You talk about balance, John, and maybe you've noticed the wheel behind Michelle here today. And that wheel is very balanced, each one of the spokes. Otherwise, when that wheel rolls, it would be a very rough roll. But at times in life, sometimes one of those spokes gets longer because, maybe one of those spokes represents our spirituality and another one our emotions, and maybe one of them is our finances, another one is our relationships, and so on and so forth. And maybe we have to spend some extra time with that child that got hurt. And that's going to take a little time out of our life because that's an emergency. But then we have to come out and rebalance the wheel after that. And maybe we need to grow some spirituality and some other things to balance that out because we spent extra time here. And that's what keeps us a budget from being real productive. Because there might be an opportunity that comes along that's completely out of budget.
Well, that's not
but
my
is
budget.
Going to make you very, very successful in life.
And you might miss it.
And you might miss it if you're on thinking little.
I help clients with looking at their cash flow, sometimes on a regular basis. And I'm thinking of a couple of wealthy clients in particular that look at their cash flow on a regular basis. And they're always looking for balance. They're not looking to count every dollar, but if they notice one area getting out of balance, they know they need to do some work in that area. Not that they'd ignore this area or just think that, I feel pretty balanced overall. They are looking at the numbers to make sure they're staying in balance.
And this can be very similar to a diet. Some people go on fad diets, very strict. They do this, that, the other thing. That's all. And other people just realize they want to have a balanced diet in general. So some days they might eat more carbohydrates or starches than other days. And some days maybe they haven't had some fresh salad for a while, so, they go back to that. But there's just kind of this ebb and flow, just like the ocean comes in, the ocean goes out, and keeping a more of a steady diet, not a strict, rigorous, count the calories, count the carbs, whatever it is.
Another way to be more balanced when we're talking about finances, let's say that you have a car that is getting older and you're starting to have to put a lot of money into it in repairs. And the repairs just keep coming. So you nickel and dime it and try to keep it going as long as possible. At some point, it's better just to go ahead and fix the problem and get a different car.
That doesn't mean you have to go out and get a brand new car if you're in a financial situation that's not going to allow that, but just a better one. We don't sit down every Sunday afternoon and go through finances like we used to. But we still check in with each other. When I make an expenditure, I let you know so that you know what's happening. And when you go out shopping, you let me know. We keep balance that way. We don't have to be so specific because we did that work and we shined the light on that earlier on in our marriage so that we're in an agreement on that. We're balanced in that area.
You established a baseline.
So now we want to go back to those 6 different ways we identified that people react. And we're going to now say what those people can do, each of those 6 different people, what they could do to change those reactions to responses to create better results.
What if someone's discouraged? What do they do?
They should identify one thing that they can do to make their finances better. And they should look at other possibilities with their finances. This is the person who always saved in their 401k, or they always did the same thing, went to their same job, did their same job. They need to look for something that they can change.
Expanding their mindset, getting more educated, exploring out the potential opportunities.
Right.
And it's important for someone that's discouraged to realize that they probably could think of 100 ways to make their situation worse. And they just have to realize, well, there's probably at least one thing that could make my situation better.
Then there's the person who panics and does the drastic actions. And Tom, your dad had a great fix for this.
He did. He used to tell me over and over, Tom, sit down with a piece of paper, draw a line in the middle of it, from top to bottom. And on this side, list all the pros about what is going on. And on the other side, all the cons. And look at them and see how they weigh out.
And here they need to take time to evaluate. So they're not making a fly-by-night decision,
Yes.
but taking time to evaluate what's going to be productive. Is this decision really going to be productive or not?
That can be a great way to slow down and make sure you're responding, not reacting.
Then there's those that make the excuses for everything. Well, it'd be nice if I had that, or I wasn't born into a family that thinks about money very well. I had an efficiency expert as a patient one time, and I apologized to him that I was running late, and he held up his hand and he says, anything else is just an excuse. I accept your apology. We need to be careful about making excuses and find one thing today that you can change. Find one thing
That you can do.
You can do, not what someone else needs to do, but what you can do.
I see 2 elements in that response. 1, stop making the excuses. 2, do something in a positive direction.
Then there's the person who puts the head in the sand. And to this person, we would say, find someone to help hold you accountable for your finances.
Get a coach, get a mentor.
Find someone to hold yourself accountable. Don't just put your head in the sand. The procrastinator puts off decisions. So
They sure do.
So identify one thing you can do now, today, to make your finances better.
This sounds very similar to when we said identify one thing that you could do to make it better or worse earlier. But this is fundamentally different for the procrastinator because the procrastinator may identify all those things. So for the procrastinator, it's important that they take action on something that they identify today.
Yes.
And not action in more preparation, because preparation can be a form of procrastination, but action toward actually achieving what they want to achieve in life. This can be confusing because a lot of people say, well, you have to have your business plan all detailed out before you get going. You have to have, an objective here. You have to know exactly how much money you want in your 401k or your life insurance policy before you die. But life doesn't happen that way. Life happens today. And those are long-term projections. They're not bad to have, but if we don't have short-term levels of achievement that we can gain, we're just going to become more and more procrastinators because we're never going to see the results. We're never going to see the light at the tunnel.
Some people will start with a business plan. They will start with a desk. They will start with all of these things that the procrastinator wants to get in order. That's fine. They're just at a different point in life. Just because you don't start with those things doesn't mean you don't start where you are. People that are successful have a bias toward action.
And finally, we have the overcommitter who just thinks, I will work harder. Rather than working harder, let's work smarter.
If you find yourself overcommitting and putting extra energy into a situation that seems to be deteriorating, don't feel like you have to stay in it. Take a break, step back, and evaluates what's happening.
I think what Rabbi Lapin said in Thou Shalt Prosper, that we need to take a little part of retirement every day, is so important here, because sometimes we get our nose to the grindstone and we just think, this is the way I'm going to get it done. I'm going to force my way through this. I'm going to get this done. And sometimes it's just, let's stop. Let's go have a cup of tea. Let's go sit on the deck in the sun a little bit. Let's take a walk. Or maybe it's even more than that. Let's take a little vacation so that we can clear our mind of the present situation and get outside our circumstances so we can think differently about it.
These are the things you do to change your mindset, develop good responses, and get great results.
Do these things, and you will notice a difference.
A Wealth Talk listener wrote this question to us. Something I don't understand about IBC is that it seems like you have to contribute a bunch of money over a long period of time to grow this cash value, and basically you end up with a relatively small amount of money that you can borrow from yourself. Don't see the value in paying thousands of dollars in premiums for 25 years so I can borrow $75,000 from myself. It seems like a big waste of time. Maybe you all could give an example of what someone might pay and over what period of time to be able to access an amount that they otherwise couldn't borrow. I feel like $75,000, for example, is something I could borrow anyway. We're going to address that question next week right here on Wealth Talks.